It's 11 p.m. on a Friday and you're at your desk again. Your friends are at a bar somewhere enjoying themselves. Maybe you're editing another video for a client who's paying you half of what you're worth, or writing code for the app that's definitely going to take off this time, or packaging products for your online store that's about to make it big. You have a day job that pays the bills, just. This side thing is supposed to be different. This is supposed to pay for the actual life you daydream about. The one where you're not constantly counting the pennies. Where life starts to get better and you have more choices and breathing room. But you've been doing this for 3 years now, maybe 4. Every evening after work, most weekends, your free time. Your friends have stopped inviting you places. You always say, I can't, I'm working on the thing that's going to change your life. Except you're not making enough yet, not even close. Last month you made £300, this month 150. You tell yourself you just need to push harder, work smarter, be more consistent. But it's been 3 years of pushing harder and the numbers barely move. You're spending your entire present trying to build a future where you'll finally have the ability to live. But the future keeps not arriving, and you're starting to forget what it feels like to spend a Friday night doing something that makes you feel alive. We all do this unconsciously. We build an entire framework around the idea that the present is preparation. Once you're making enough money, you'll travel. Once you have the degree, you'll pursue what you actually want. Once you're in better shape, you'll start dating seriously. Once you meet the right person, you'll start to feel happier. And so everything feels temporary. Where you live is fine for now. Your body is something you're working on. The work you're doing is just what you have to do until things turn around. You keep imagining a future version of yourself who's arrived, who's stable and successful and ready, and that person gets to actually live. You're not that person yet, so everything you do now has this quality of building, trying to get your head above water. From the outside, this looks measured and sensible. You're doing what you're supposed to do. You're moving forward, making reasonable decisions, just waiting until the conditions are right and your ship finally comes in. We all have goals which we believe, when accomplished, will make us feel whole and successful. And yet we've all had that experience where we finally get what we've always dreamed of and it changes nothing. When you were a child, it may have been a bicycle, games console, the latest gadget. As adults, we continue to play the same game, but bicycles are careers, games consoles are bank accounts, and gadgets are romantic partners. You see versions of this even at the extreme end. Some world champions and former Olympians talk about winning the event they've built their lives around, standing on the podium, feeling the rush, and then waking up the next morning feeling more or less themselves again. Some even report not feeling true joy winning a medal, just relief, or even disappointment if it's not gold, and the feeling of needing to find the next thing soon arrives. Achieving our dream never makes us feel like we think it will. We may not be the world champion in anything, but almost all of us can relate to having achieved something, only for the satisfaction, if any, to be anticlimactic. The finishing line keeps moving. You thought enough was a number, but it turns out to be a feeling that stays just out of reach. This endless chasing means you can't commit to anything because nothing feels real or permanent yet. The job is temporary until you figure out how to make more money. The town you're in is temporary until you decide where you really want to live. Even relationships, they're fine for now, but you're keeping part of yourself in reserve for the person you'll be when you're finally ready. Everything becomes an intermediate step for something else. The present isn't valuable in itself, it's only valuable for what it might produce later. You're not living your days, you're accumulating resources for a life you hope you'll eventually be able to live. And the exhausting part is that you're working constantly. You're grinding, optimizing, sacrificing, pushing. You're doing everything right according to logic of delayed gratification, but the destination never gets closer. You're busy, you're disciplined, you're committed, and you're somehow still in the waiting room. The question that starts to surface, usually late at night when you're too tired to keep convincing yourself, what if the dream never happens? What if ready isn't the place you arrive at? What if you're spending your entire life preparing for a version of living that doesn't exist? I'm reminded of the scene from the Tom Cruise's 2004 film Collateral, where his character Vincent rebukes his driver Max, portrayed by Jamie Foxx, for endlessly postponing a dream. Vincent says, someday my dream will come. One night you'll wake up and discover it never happened. It's all turned around on you. Suddenly you're old. Didn't happen and it never will, because you were never going to do it anyway. You'll push it into memory and then zone out in your Barker lounge, being hypnotized by daytime TV for the rest of your life. All it ever took was a down payment on a Lincoln Town Car. That girl, you can't even call that girl. What the fuck are you still doing driving a cab? Albert Camus was a French-Algerian philosopher-writer working in the mid-20th century. He contracted tuberculosis as a teenager and lived with recurring illness for years, which left him acutely aware that his time might be limited. That awareness shaped how he thought about the present. He kept returning to the problem of how people endure today by leaning on what they hope lies in the future. Not postponement specifically, but the habit underneath it. The way people endure the present by imagining some rose garden just beyond tomorrow. They put up with noticeably empty days because they believe those days will be eventually justified by something that comes later. Camus is most famous for his essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, a figure from Greek mythology punished by the gods for defying them. His punishment isn't pain in the usual sense, it's repetition. Every day for eternity, he pushes a heavy boulder up a mountain. Near the top, it slips from his hands and rolls all the way back down. He follows it, reaches the bottom, and begins again. The pushing continues, and that repetition is the reality of Sisyphus's life, forever. At the end of the essay, Camus says, one must imagine Sisyphus happy. Not because the task becomes meaningful or because he finds purpose in the struggle, but because he accepts that this, the rolling, the pushing, the return to the bottom, is all there is. The boulder never stays at the top, and his freedom comes from accepting that. So what does the Greek myth about eternal labour have to do with you pursuing a dream at 11 p.m. on a Friday? Camus would say there is no future life. The life you're waiting to begin doesn't exist as a stable state you arrive at and then inhabit. Even if you hit your income goal tomorrow, you still have rent, still have uncertainty, still have new goals that reveal themselves. The boulder doesn't stay at the top. What you're calling real life, the version where you're finally stable enough to stop worrying and start living, is just another boulder roll. You never reach your destination. It's just a temporary state that will require more work, more adjustment, more pushing. The postponement logic assumes there's a moment when the preparation ends and the living begins. But Camus would ask, what if the preparation is the living? What if this, incomplete, uncertain, still grinding, is what life actually looks like? The working at 11 p.m, the sacrifices, the social life you miss. This is the version of life that actually happens. This is what it looks like to be a person with a body, with time passing, with goals that take years to materialize, or don't materialize at all. You're waiting for a version of yourself who's arrived, who's ready, who gets to finally relax and live. But Sisyphus never becomes a different person. He's the person pushing the boulder. That's the life. There's no separate version where he's done pushing and now gets to do something else. Camus thought Sisyphus becomes interesting at a very specific moment. Not when he's pushing the boulder up the mountain, but when he's walking back down. That walk is the only part of the cycle where nothing is being accomplished. Nothing is being built toward. There's no progress to appeal to. Sisyphus is simply there, aware that this cycle is what his life consists of. For Camus, that awareness matters because it removes the expectation that the task must end for life to begin. It refutes the idea that the present exists mainly to justify the future. It makes it harder to believe that your life is on hold. The days you've been trying to get through don't work differently from the days you're waiting for. They take time, they ask things of you, and they leave their mark. This doesn't suddenly make everything satisfying. Work still feels like work. Uncertainty still feels uncomfortable. Some days still feel flat. What changes is how you interpret those experiences. You stop treating them as preparation. The question shifts from when do I get to start living to what if I'm already living and I'm just refusing to recognize it as life? You're here, you have a body that wakes up every day. You have people who would like to see you. You have Friday nights. This is life. The financial stability you're working towards might arrive or it might not. But even if it does, it won't change the fundamental structure of your existence. You'll still be someone with time passing, with new uncertainties, with boulders that need pushing. This doesn't mean giving up on your goals. You can still want things, still work towards them. Camus isn't telling you to abandon your dreams. What it means is recognizing that achieving them won't fundamentally transform the conditions of your life. You won't become a person who exists outside of uncertainty, scarcity, or insecurity. You'll be someone who achieved a goal and now has new problems, new thresholds, new boulders. This also doesn't mean find meaning in the struggle or be grateful for the grind. Camus wasn't interested in making suffering noble or claiming that hardships build character. He was saying something simpler. The struggle is absurd. The universe doesn't care about your boulder. There's no cosmic reward waiting. But you're the one pushing, and you get to decide whether you push while treating the present as a trial run, or whether you push while recognizing that this, right now, imperfect, unfinished, is your life. The difference isn't in the action. You're still working hard, still working late. The difference is whether you're here while you're doing it, or whether you're somewhere else waiting for your life to begin. If there's a cost to postponement, it isn't that you miss out on a perfect future. It's that you slowly distance yourself from the life that's already happening, and that distance can persist even when circumstances improve. It's 11 p.m. on a Friday. You're still at your desk. Your friends are still out somewhere. The side project still isn't paying much. If you looked at it from the outside, nothing has really changed. But what can change is the way you experience it. Instead of asking when this finally turns into a life that counts, you start noticing how much you've been putting off until then. The boulder is still there. It'll be there tomorrow. You'll push it again, it'll roll back down, and you'll start over. That part doesn't change. That's just how it goes. You don't suddenly become ready. The feeling of being finished never really shows up. Even when things improve, there's always something else to sort out. Something else to reach before you let yourself relax. Perhaps the answer is not to separate the work from an imagined future life. It's all living after all. Perhaps the answer is to remember that this isn't a dry run for some future perfect life. This is it.